10. Albanian underground air base. Built near a mountain outside the city of Lecce in northern Albania, the Jada air base was originally meant to prevent the Yugoslav Air Force from entering the country's airspace. Construction began in 1969 and the base was completed in the mid-70s. It took a long time to build the base due to its complex features, which include tunnels built directly into the mountain. These passages were used for storing aircraft and had enough room for around 50 planes plus personnel. In 1997, members of a rebel movement stormed the base amid a national revolt against the Albanian government. They destroyed several buildings, including the control tower, and the soldiers who were stationed at the property fled, leaving it abandoned. The ruined structures were never rebuilt due to a lack of funding, and in 2000, all flying operations to and from the base ended. There's currently no permanent military presence here, and the site functions as a storage facility for planes that have been taken out of service. Over 70 aircraft sit both outside and in the tunnels, falling further into decay alongside the equally dilapidated installations that have also been left to rot. 9. Lake Norman mystery wreck. In 2013, firefighters from the Charlotte Fire Department in North Carolina discovered a submerged seaplane in Lake Norman using sonar technology. The aircraft wasn't visible from the surface. It was sitting at the deepest part of the lake, 90 feet, 27 meters below the water's surface. To get a closer look, the fire department sent divers to the site, where they identified the wreck as a single-engine, single-seat plane. The crew couldn't get the aircraft's doors open, but they searched thoroughly enough to know that there were no remains of crash victims inside. One woman, Barbara Anderson, thought the plane might be hers. 30 years before the discovery of the sunken seaplane, Anderson's plane went missing. She ultimately learned that it rolled into the water and sank when flight instructors who were using it for training forgot to engage the parking brake properly. Anderson had spent years and thousands of dollars searching for her missing plane to no avail. As of November 2013, the Federal Aviation Administration was attempting to figure out who the owner of the plane was and vowed not to remove it from the water until that determination was made. Whether or not the owner has been reunited with their plane remains unknown, as the stories remained conspicuously absent from the news since then. 8. Disputed jumbo jet. Back in 2016, the owner of the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in McMinnville, Oregon, ran into money problems. A foreclosure auction of the nonprofit's assets was scheduled when he decided to declare bankruptcy at the last minute, putting the sale on hold indefinitely. The foundation's trustee, Lisa Anderson, told Oregon Live that the organization had tried to negotiate the sale of its assets to satisfy a $2.2 million debt to a construction company after already ponying up $150 million. But the parties simply couldn't come to an agreement, prompting the decision to go bankrupt. 6 years later, the matter is still being settled. The Yamhill County Sheriff's Office recently announced that a derelict Boeing 748 jumbo jet that sits outside the former museum will soon be sold at a foreclosure auction. Across the fuselage, the plane bears the name of the former company, Evergreen International Aviation. The once worldwide company was founded in 1960, but abruptly went out of business in late 2013, shortly before filing for bankruptcy the following year. Entrepreneur Bill Stoller, whose company McMinnville Properties owns the property, hopes to secure ownership of the plane when the sale rolls around on July 25th. It's unclear whether this is likely to happen, especially since the museum's troubles date back to its previous owners, who began selling off iconic aircraft years ago to settle debts. And even if the company acquires the plane, they're admittedly unsure of exactly what they'll do with it, according to Wayne Marshall, who heads the McMinnville Properties parent company, the Stoller Group. For now, the plane's future hangs in the balance as it sits at the center of a tedious legal back and forth between potential owners who seem to lack a clear vision of what they plan to use it for. 7. Ohio Aircraft Graveyard. When World War II ended, the US military no longer needed most of the equipment it had used in the fight against the Axis powers. A lot of the machinery was left to deteriorate in machine graveyards, many of which still exist today. Earlier this year, urban explorer and photographer Johnny Jew explored one of these sites in rural Ohio. He was driving around in search of abandoned buildings when he noticed a large open space on the map he was using. Out of curiosity, Johnny went to the site and encountered the sad, rusting remains of fighter jets and other military and civilian aircraft sitting in the snow, surrounded by trees and scrap metal. He crossed paths with the property owner, who allowed him to look around and offered some history on the site while the explorer snapped photos. The owner told Johnny that the collection was amassed by a scrapyard worker named Walter Soplata, who began buying decommissioned military aircraft and reassembling them in his backyard during the late 1940s. There are around 30 planes at the site, including a deteriorating F-8060 fighter plane, a US Air Force B-25 plane, and an old Boeing 727. Soplata left the site to his family when he passed away in 2010. They do their best to keep its location a secret to prevent thieves from stealing and scrapping parts from their historic vehicles. 6. Lockheed P-1 Ventura. The twin-engine Lockheed P-1 Ventura patrol bomber first saw combat in Europe in 1942 with the British Royal Air Force, RAF. The following year, the US Navy used it for fighting in the Pacific Theater. The US Army Air Forces, USAAF, various British Commonwealth forces, and other militaries have also used the plane. In 1944, a wrecked Lockheed P-1 Ventura was abandoned at the Talasea airfield in Papua New Guinea after it was hit by a shell during a raid on the nearby Rabaul township. The pilot, Royal New Zealand Air Force Flight Lieutenant Frederick N.R. Thomas, eased the aircraft to Talasea as gracefully as he could on one engine. It made a hard landing, but thankfully nobody was hurt. Thomas received the Distinguished Flying Cross DFC award for successfully executing the forced landing. The runway at Talasea was too short for the bomber to take off from, and they didn't try to fix it. Instead, it was stripped for parts and abandoned, and it remains at the site to this day. If you had a chance to fly in a military aircraft and experience its high-speed capabilities, would you? Tell us in the comments, and hit subscribe while you're at it. 5. Beautiful Betsy. One day in February 1945, as World War II entered its final months, a B-24 Liberator bomber nicknamed Beautiful Betsy vanished while flying across Australia from Darwin to Brisbane. 6 American service members and 2 British soldiers disappeared along with it. The plane had been damaged during previous bombing missions. By then, it was only being used for short flights and was slated for retirement. Numerous expeditions failed to find the missing aircraft, and its fate remained a mystery until 49 years later, when a park ranger discovered the wreck in Crumbit Tops National Park while surveying wildfire damage in 1994. The blaze had cleared overgrowth, leaving enough of the plane exposed for the ranger to see it glistening in the sun. Specialists from the US Army investigated the site and collected human remains. The wreck was then opened to the public and remains in place today, serving as an ever-present reminder of a once-forgotten tragedy. 4. St. Augustine Plane Graveyard. In early 2009, photographer Walter Arnold discovered a roadside lot filled with rusting historic planes in St. Augustine, Florida. He had no idea at the time that the images he snapped would help launch his career, or that he'd someday help to spread the history of how the planes ended up at the site. They were identified as Grumman S-2 trackers. The S-2 tracker was the first anti-submarine warfare aircraft used by the US Navy. It was designed and built during the early 1950s and remained in service under the American military until the mid-70s. Arnold recorded the tail fin numbers on the abandoned aircraft. With the help of a friend, he managed to track down the names of pilots who'd flown the graveyard's planes during their military careers. One former pilot, George Verney, even found photos of some of the planes from back when they were still in operation. But why did they end up on a seemingly random property in northern Florida? They were moved there from the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, the world's largest aircraft boneyard, as part of an agreement to provide Turkey with some planes to replace its outdated fleet. The deal came after Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran in 1979 and shut down all US installations throughout the country, including those that were being used to monitor Soviet activity. American authorities agreed to give the planes to Turkey in exchange for being able to establish new listening stations there. While at least 11 S-2 trackers made their way to Turkey, getting the planes there proved to be a bureaucratic nightmare. It took time, and 8 of the aircraft were eventually declared unfit for service and were simply left at the lot. Unfortunately for explorers and history enthusiasts, they were removed in recent years and survive only in photographs. 3. Antonov AN24. Behind some buildings in the residential neighborhood of Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, there's a noticeably out-of-place decommissioned Antonov AN24 plane. Only 1,264 of the Soviet turboprop aircraft were produced between 1959 and 1979. The AN-24 was far from glamorous, but it was built to withstand harsh conditions. It needed minimal maintenance and was capable of taking off from and landing on unpaved runways. This type of plane was perfect for Mongolia's challenging geography and climate. During the 1960s and 70s, the country's Air Force and 2 civilian operators acquired several AN-24s. But like all aircraft, they eventually became outdated and they were parked in residential areas after they were taken out of service. The Curiosity placed 77-foot-long, 23 meters AN-24 that remains visible today, belongs to the local School of Mechanical Engineering and Transportation and is used for educational purposes. 2. Bali's abandoned planes. There are at least 4 abandoned planes of unknown origin throughout the Indonesian island of Bali. One of them, a Boeing 737 passenger jet, is located at an abandoned quarry just minutes away from the Pandawa beach near the southern coast. It sits in a field along a busy highway, but feels like it's a world away from the hustle and bustle of the rest of the island. The 737 is a popular tourist attraction, but anyone who goes there searching for answers about how it got there in the first place is likely to leave disappointed. Nobody seems to know the story behind why the aircraft was seemingly plopped down into the field one day and was left to deteriorate, and if anyone does know anything, they've kept quiet about it. A local rumor holds that there were once plans to convert the aircraft into a restaurant, but the owner ran out of money. But these claims are unverified, and in some ways, that's not a bad thing. In fact, many people are actually drawn to the site by the plane's mysterious past, and they might find it less interesting if they knew where it came from and why. Either way, the property owner is happy to let visitors look around, for a price, of course. After the plane began attracting tourists, they installed a gated fence and hired a security guard to ensure that anyone who wants to take a peek pays for the opportunity. There are also 2 other abandoned 737s in seemingly random places throughout Bali, including one that sits next door to a Dunkin' Donuts and almost touches the building, as well as a McDonnell Douglas DC-10. Little is known about how any of these decaying aircraft ended up at their current resting places, but many suspect that they're the result of failed business ventures. 1. Mi-6 chopper. During an oil prospecting expedition in 1981, an Mi-6 helicopter stopped to refuel at the Kalampur base in Russia's Yamolo-Nenets region, roughly 1,500 miles, 2,440 kilometers outside Moscow. 5 minutes after the chopper took off, its engines failed, forcing its pilots to crash land in a swamp. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but the chopper was severely damaged. An investigation revealed that workers at the base had accidentally filled the fuel tanks with a mixture of gas and water, which is what killed the engines. Over 40 years later, the wreck is still sitting in the swamp, and as far as anyone knows, there are no plans to remove it. The MIL Mi-6 was a heavy transport helicopter that was built for both military and civilian use. It was first built in 1959 and was the largest helicopter in production until it was superseded by the MIL Mi-26 in 1980. The colossal chopper is normally flown by a flight crew consisting of at least 5 members and can seat up to 65 armed troops. It can also carry vehicles and other large bulky loads of equipment. Over 900 Mi-6s were built before the model was retired in 2002. Thanks for watching. Which one of these abandoned planes fascinates you the most? Tell us in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.